In this film, I will study two more function blocks, the trigger blocks, R-trig and F-trig. So far, I have used some of the logic blocks. We have seen the set and reset latches, we've used the timers, we've used comparison together with an enable input. We've also used move with the enable input. Now I will show the triggers R-trig and F-trig. And in the next film, with the example of a trigger, I will also use an add block with an enable input. But we start with the trigger block. Sometimes we want to have a signal that is true for only one scan cycle, which means that it becomes true and then immediately becomes false again. One of the blocks that we can use for this is the R-trig block. It looks like this in codices. The R in R-trig stands for rising edge, which means that this block will react on the rising edge in the input signal. The input signal must be a Boolean. If I use the Boolean pulse here, like this, the block will react on the positive edge, the rising edge, when pulse goes from false to true. It will react on this edge. We can see that in the symbol here as well. We have the positive edge here and the reaction in the lamp here. When the block sees this positive edge, it will give a super short true signal, just for one scan cycle. It becomes false immediately again. And then, regardless of how long this pulse is, it waits until it sees the next positive edge and gives a new, extremely short, true signal. In order to achieve this, the block needs to have a memory, which means that it needs a name. We can see that here. The name of the instance allocates memory for the block to use. One word of advice: if you're using more than one trigger block, remember not to give them the same name, because then they will become the same block, as they are occupying the same area in the memory. The other block that gives a trigger function is the F-trig. Here is the F-trig block in codices. We can see it requires a name as well. F in F-trig stands for falling edge, which means that this block will react on the negative edge in the input signal. Again, we need a Boolean input, here, pulse. And now the block will see when the input signal goes from true to false. Then the block gives a short true signal during that transition, during that scan cycle. Nothing happens while the signal remains true, or when it becomes false, not until it becomes false again. Then the block gives us one true pulse in the output. These blocks are very useful if we want to react on when a button is pressed or released, for example. I will show one use of the R-trig block in the example in the next film.